So yeah, I'm here from Santa Fe. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and also a mindfulness teacher. I'm the program director at the Sky Center, and we have a micro to macro continuum of services in order to support our mission of preventing youth suicide. And every year it's our pleasure to come to Head to Toe. This is my first time presenting in this way. And it's an interesting challenge, but certainly my nervous system is working with this format. So thank you all for your smiles and your hellos at the beginning. It did a lot to help me connect and feel like we're in the room together in this new world. As I start our time together, I want to set the frame, starting with the title, Trauma Sensitive Resiliency. I want to be sensitive that we're all in trauma right now on various different levels. And so the sensitivity begins with how I hope to hold the space for you today. I will be offering some practices, and of course, what's beautiful about this is you can just relax and listen and take it in. You can participate at your level, at your comfort level. We'll have 3 main experiential exercises that I'll be offering throughout the course of the presentation. And one of them will, in the beginning, we'll have the opportunity for some breakout time to connect socially. So let's go to the next. Oh, I'm controlling the slides, right? Oh, it didn't work. So here are the learning objectives that Head to Toe probably has already shared with you all. We have a toolkit for well-being that's part of our really more to the macro end of the spectrum of our continuum of services at the Sky Center. It's our belief that when we create more safety in our community, we have a more empowered community, safety and empowerment being sort of the 2 wings of suicide prevention as we see it. And I'll expand on this today. The toolkit is intended to provide both the safety of feeling connected, feeling that one belongs, feeling that you live inside of a community that cares for your well-being, that offers the kind of resources that allow one to have the privilege of resiliency. So much that I've been reading during this time speaks to my heart. We're always talking to kids about and cheering them on when they're resilient in spite of extraordinary circumstances. And what I think we're all learning collectively, and I hope the awareness and the consciousness is being raised because of this time, that it's not so much about individual responsibility for resiliency, but collective responsibility, contexts that help our children thrive and help us thrive as well. So next slide. Or I have to do it, okay. I'm sorry, everyone. So we will spend some time connecting, practicing some self-regulation, looking at trauma symptomology so that we can manage it with awareness. We have choice, how we promote resiliency at the Sky Center, and how we practice. So this is just a brief overview of our toolkit. Each one of these spokes connects to a risk factor for suicide. Social connection is the antidote to isolation. Self-regulation is a skill necessary for managing moods. Depression and anxiety being 2 of the highest risk factors for suicide. The ability to regulate is vital. Mindful awareness, antidote to a wandering mind, and sort of the anchor beneath all of our toolkit practices. A mind that wanders into the future or into the past can be unhelpful. Also, practices from mindful awareness strategies can help us stabilize and self-regulate, physiological well-being, an antidote to health factors, for starters, that could be related to suicide risk factors. We know that our emotional health is intimately connected to our physical health. And also this connects to context. If we don't have resources for our physiological well-being, our mental health is going to be impacted greatly. And we're seeing this right now. I'm going to do my best not to get too emotional today because so much of this is so relevant right now to what we're seeing in the world. Hope. Okay, this is where I'm really going to have to control my waterworks. Hopelessness is one of the greatest risk factors for suicide. And without hope, we cannot foster resilience. So this is something that we need skill set, we need lifestyle, we need, where there is help, there is hope. And that is one of our mottos at the Sky Center. Seeing all of your faces, all of you are helpers. We know the wonderful Mr. Rogers quote, when there is a crisis, look to the helpers. So thank you all. Actually gives me goosebumps. Every time I'm in a community of helpers, it gives me a lot of hope. So thank you. And nature. I'm aware personally of how bolstering nature has been during this time. And I'll talk more about that as we get down the road of the presentation. The rhythms of nature, the sense of belonging to something greater than ourselves, spring returning, and our own nature, returning to our own nature, our own humanity, our own essential goodness. Nature represents all of this for me in terms of what we need for resiliency, and also the model of nature in its resiliency. And we've had a lot of examples of that with the human impact changing so drastically in the last couple months. So that's the overview of what we're going to take a look at today. So Jackie, there we go. The arrow has a hard time showing because I've got the bar across the bottom, but so to continue with the frame for the day, here's a review of our nervous system response. We walk through the world with our bodies truly in charge of monitoring for threat or safety. And just to introduce sort of a broad introduction to polyvagal theory, we have a nerve that goes from the cranium all the way down into our gut that is essential to controlling our autonomic nervous system. When we are in our stress response, all of those things happen on the left, and it's an adaptive survival response. Adaptive is key. When we are out of threat, our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and it tells us that we're safe. So it's an adaptive response that vacillates between, am I in threat? Am I in safety? And what the research is showing us is that 80% of the messages that we receive from the world are body-based. They're not cognitive. 80% of our initial responses are sense over story. Then our brain kicks in, it feels the stress inside of our body. The brain kicks in and starts putting a narrative to it really quickly. I'm in threat because of this. I'm in safety because of that. And our nervous system either escalates into the stress response or chills out because we felt some safety. So part of our toolkit for well-being, or perhaps all of our toolkit for well-being, is creating the internal awareness of how we are sensing threat, how we are sensing safety, and being able to have a more skillful response, bringing our reason and judgment online so that we can accurately assess if we're in a life-threatening situation. And if we are, that adaptive survival response will kick in when we need it. If we're in a situation and we are assessing it as life-threatening. When it is not, it can take us into some unskillful responses. That heightened stress response can actually create rupture in some of the primary relationships that we need for safety, to be able to manage the stress and be resilient, to adapt to challenging situations with the supports and the interpersonal skills that we need. The problem is, as we all know, even before the pandemic, we are living in unprecedented times with exposure to threat at an unprecedented level. These little devices are part of it. You cannot go 5 minutes without being told how much threat you're under, and it hasn't gotten better. So we're working with a lot of threat, and it's real. And at the same time, in order for us to make skillful choices, to stay connected to those, even those who we disagree with, we're going to need to be bringing our regulated, mobilized nervous system online. And as we do that for ourselves, we are going to be better able to what is called co-regulate with the students who we work with the youth that we work with. So much of what we do with the youth that we work with is nonverbal. That 80% of communication that's coming heart to heart, nervous system to nervous system, is assessing for threat and safety. And part of our work in order to stay connected with our community, with the youth that we're serving, is to do some internal work to offer a safe anchor for the people that we're working with. So that's what I hope to offer today, some ability to create safe anchor within yourself so that you can offer it to others, so that we can build some sturdy vessels to get us through this storm. We've all probably seen the meme going around, and maybe you haven't, that says, but I really appreciated it. We're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. I can't change some larger systems, but what I can change are the systems that I'm a part of. And I can also help empower the youth that I work with to bring their anchor online so they can have skillful choice to mobilize, take action, and not feel hopeless. So that's part of the intention today, to spread some of that opportunity and some of that skill set for you all to have inside of your own experience, inside of your own bodies, that you can then offer out into the communities that you work inside of. So without further ado, we're going to start with a practice. And I invite you to turn your screen off if you'd like. There's going to be an invitation to close your eyes. I just mean you can turn your video off, go into non-seeing mode. So if you would like to have an internal experience, I invite you to close your eyes. For some of us, that's actually not very soothing at all, and that's part of the trauma sensitivity. That's part of what we need to know when we're guiding children through these practices, that doing breath work and closing eyes is really counterindicated for kiddos who've been through trauma. So that's the trauma sensitive piece. Language that's invitational is always very, very important with the youth that we're serving. And so I'll be modeling that today. And also giving youth an opportunity to have external resources. So what I mean by that is, in your room, if there's a window that's available to you, I invite you to take a look outside as I guide you through this experience, and that external resource of the blue sky or a tree outside, or if you have a painting in your room that gives you a lot of comfort or an image, that will be what I will invite you to focus on as I guide you through this exercise. If you were seeing a youth in your office, that would be how you would introduce it. You don't have to close your eyes. I just want to invite you. This is someone who might be in a dysregulated state, invite you to take a look around the room and then maybe find something that feels soothing that you can focus your attention on outside of yourself. If you do feel comfortable closing your eyes, I invite you to do so now as I guide us through an activity intended to be very soothing. And as we go through some material which may be slightly evocative or provocative, this will be a resource for you as we go through our time together today. So we will begin in this way, creating some safety right from the start. With eyes closed or open, I invite you now to feel your feet on the ground. Noticing in your torso or along the front axis of your body, throat, heart, or gut, what sort of physical response you might feel as you tune into the bottom of your feet. I'll invite you now to tune in to the feeling of your seat meeting your chair. And again, along the front axis of the body, is there any kind of tightening or opening in the throat, heart, or gut? And then an invitation to feel your back against your chair. And again, tune in to what we call the felt sense of your nervous system, of the internal response or emotional response or physical response to the feeling of the back against the chair. And then I invite you, scanning back through feet, seat, or back, to notice which choice personally for you makes you feel most comforted, most at ease, most connected. And whenever you need it, that will be the resource in your body to return to bring your mind back to the present moment, to feel connected to what is here, to the safety that is here just for this moment. And I now invite you either to focus your attention very intentionally outside your window or on the external resource that you've chosen. Study it, tune into it. Let your attention describe it with colors, quality of light, perhaps even feeling the temperature on your skin. If your eyes are closed, I invite you to picture a place that is familiar and comforting to you in a natural environment. Maybe there's water present, and I invite you to look and see what colors are present. If there's light dancing on the water, is the water moving or still? Are there sounds present? Are there trees in your environment? How are the leaves moving? Are you staring at a horizon, or is nature close to you? Just taking it all in, the sights, sounds, smells. And as you do so, tuning in to what's going on in your experience inside of your torso in terms of a releasing or a tightening, a relaxation, if it's available to you. Just noticing what's here. And if this is not available to you today, that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly okay. Just relaxing and listening, taking some mental notes for future reference is of course okay. And I invite you, before this exercise ends, to imagine you could take a blueprint or an X-ray inside of your being. If the sense of soothing is available to you, a blueprint, an X-ray that also connects to the place in your body that you've chosen feet, seat, or back, to feel connected, to feel safe, to feel grounded when the mind wanders. And that invitation is available to you for the rest of the time that we spend together, and of course, for the rest of the time that you go out into the world. To be able to feel your feet and connect with this visual is an invitation and an offering. And I invite you now to open your eyes. And we will break out into groups of 4. And here's the simple instruction, if you feel comfortable, invitation, is simply to share. It could have been what you were looking at outside. Share that and what the felt sense was in your body. Or share the place that you went to. We'll have about 2 minutes to share. If you are listening, and everyone is simply invited to listen without interjecting, one speaker at a time. When you are listening, tune into how someone's sharing about a place that offers them safety, what the response is in your body. And just notice it. And I'll invite you to journal if you have pen and paper available, what it is that you notice when you're in connection with someone else with a regulated nervous system. Okay, well, welcome back. I hope that was a pleasant experience. Thank you for indulging me. And before we scroll to the next slide, I just want to give the credit to Peter Levine and his seminal work in somatic experiencing. The exercise we just practiced, as some of you may already know, most of you may already know, is called grounding and resourcing. So the piece around connecting with our feet, our seat, and our back, and taking an external resource is grounding. And a lot of time when we're working with kiddos, that's about as far as we can get. The resourcing piece can be kind of the next level to really engage that parasympathetic nervous system response. But those can be some nice tools. And even the resourcing, we just went deep and slow with it. But the resourcing could be as simple as, like, do you have a pet, or who's your favorite person? What's your favorite meal? Just little things to engage that sense of safety and pleasure that can be helpful when we've got a dysregulated kiddo sitting across from us. So as we shift into a few slides, reviewing trauma symptomology and what makes trauma-informed systems, connecting back to that idea of context, which is so important in terms of resiliency, this resource is available to you. If any slight elevation comes up as we review what's going on for all of us inside of this pandemic and inside of the work that we do, I invite you to tune into your resource, to tune into that blueprint, tune into your body, and offer yourself some kindness. So here are some symptoms of toxic stress, which I think we can all recognize. Ironically, some of the things that I practice when I'm in toxic stress mode, busyness, it still happened inside of this context, but there have been some gifts too. I haven't been in my car shuttling children from place to place, going from the Sky Center to my private practice to the basketball game. And some of that is just the way life is, or was, and hopefully will be again in some ways, but hopefully we can integrate some of what we're learning in terms of that toxicity that we were all a part of inside of our context, where we could shift into busyness, shift into overwhelm, rumination, feel detached from our experience as a way to cope, or even not able to connect to others' stress, other people's experience. So a review of the Diagnostical Statistical Manual 5 of what post-traumatic stress disorder, the symptoms are re-experiencing, more commonly known as flashbacks. So a youth could be in our classroom and a loud noise could trigger a traumatic experience for them. Or they could hear a firm tone from us and it might feel like something else in their nervous system. Remembering that 80% our bodies are experiencing what's going on before our minds are making sense of it. And if we've been through trauma, our minds might not be able to make sense of it in the same way that someone who has not been through a trauma experience might experience. Avoidance, wanting to avoid situations. This can look like substance use and abuse. This can look like over diving into our screens, binge watching Netflix. This can also look like someone going to the bathroom in a classroom. If we have in-person classrooms, again, more times than seems necessary in order to get themselves to a place of safety. Hyperarousal, being jumpy, easily triggered. We know that feeling. I was driving, I took my kids to get ice cream and I immediately felt like I was putting them in harm's way a couple days ago. They sat in the car, I went into Baskin Robbins. Whew, my hypervigilance just flared. I was dropping coins on the floor and my keys. I couldn't quite handle myself. And on the drive home, I'd hear a horn or a siren and I could feel that hyperarousal in my body. Negative thoughts and beliefs, and this can have such an impact on our ability to feel hopeful. When we've been through or experiencing adverse events, it's very hard to shift into the gear of imagining a future that is better than the one that we're in right now, where there might be opportunities once again, and these thoughts can start to play on repeat when we've been through trauma over and over again. This is from here, the nicabm.com website. So this is a resource that you could Google. It is so helpful for the youth that we're working with to understand their nervous system responses as adaptive rather than to see themselves as broken. I've had so many conversations with youth explaining their in ways that it's accessible, their sympathetic and their nervous system and their parasympathetic nervous system response. And there is a wash of relief when they understand that their bodies are taking care of them, trying to get them to safety. And so when they're at the either end of the spectrum, rather than in that window of tolerance where we're functioning in a way that feels skillful, that feels regulated, that feels that we can achieve our goals in a way that we would like, we're not out of that window of tolerance. That's the place where we need to be for learning. That's the place we need to be engaged with our peers and with our families. And when we've been through trauma, it's very hard to live in that space. The Toolkit for Well-Being helps us return to that window of tolerance where we can be more resilient. This is not to say that is where we are supposed to be all the time. I want to reiterate the adaptive quality of being out of our window of tolerance. That is our body adapting to the stressors that we are facing and mobilizing to keep us safe. I needed to be a little hypervigilant in Baskin Robbins. I needed to get the hand sanitizer and not touch my face and all of that stuff. I mean, this wasn't extreme. I'm giving a hypervigilance light example. But we're going in and out of our window of tolerance all day long in an adaptive way. We just want to restore our balance, our recovery. We want to have some equanimity in our lived experience. When we are too much in a nervous system state of either hyper or hypo arousal, it has an impact on our ability to rebound from crisis, on our resiliency. Jackie, is there a way for you to scroll the slide? Because my arrow, oh, there's the arrow, okay. So in terms of context, part of this is just all of us being informed on what the trauma symptomology is, what it might look like, and it's beyond the traditional things that we think of, flashbacks. It might be someone, as I mentioned earlier, leaving the classroom repeatedly, behavioral issues that are masking the real trouble at home, as school mental health professionals, things that are common sense to us, but aren't necessarily to the administrators that we work with. I think in the last few years, trauma-informed has become a bit of a buzzword, and this is a good thing. We've become much better educated, and the context has been shifting to understand that what's going on with children is less about something organic and individual and more about the context that they are inside of. This is going to be true now more than ever as we see behavioral regressions, as we see, heightened vigilance and children behaving in ways that will demand that we understand how this pandemic is impacting them and impacting their individual contexts as well. So what's our part in building resiliency? This slide is to remind me of a bit of research out of the University of Arizona, resiliency research that described children in terms of the flowers that you see on your screen, dandelions and orchids. And that some kiddos, and really for me, it is attached to our wiring. We all come in with a certain kind of autonomic nervous system sensitivity based on our genetic history, based on multi-generational trauma or lack thereof, based on even our prenatal experience in the womb. Or it's just simple genetic code. The good news is well-being is a skill set that can be learned, that can be practiced, that can be taught. As I share with clients time and time again, after we do their family history and look at concerns anywhere from a long multi-generational history of trauma, a long multi-generational history of substance abuse, often interrelated. The good news is that's not destiny, and we can use those maps as a way to impact the kind of lifestyle choices we can make in the future. Just like someone who has a long history of diabetes, long history of heart disease, long history of cancer, there are certain lifestyle choices that we can make to impact how our own life, how our own narrative, how our own story unfolds. And with awareness, it's not a life sentence of you are doomed to repeat this story. It's actually incredible information that we can use to make different kinds of choices. If you knew you had a long history of diabetes, you might watch the sugar. Alcohol, I had a therapist say this to me, with the long history of alcoholism that was in my family that terrified me as a young person. Watch the alcohol. You have awareness. You have choice. It's not always that simple. The dandelion and the orchid analogy. Our orchid children are more sensitive, perhaps have a more sensitive autonomic nervous system that is more easily triggered, more easily engaged when there's a threat. I started being interested in this when I had a baby who was labeled as difficult, my now 13-year-old daughter. she had to be swaddled and on my body at all times, or otherwise she was screaming. It wasn't colic. It was an oversensitive nervous system. Don't need to go into all that personal history, but she came by it naturally. And so it's been a life, you know, the personal becomes political. It's been a lifetime goal of mine to understand the dandelion children who, in spite of whatever environment they're in, they tend to thrive, they tend to bloom, they tend to prosper. And there are ways of understanding the skill set of the dandelion children that can help us cultivate those skills, provide the resources within context where those resources may be lacking, so that the orchid children have the chance to bloom into the more beautiful, extraordinary, individualistic flowers that they are. And of course, it's a spectrum. Any of us are a dandelion or an orchid on any given day, and life circumstances are going to impact that. My two kids are both dandelions and orchids on any given day. But how can we move forward, offering a toolkit within ourselves and out to the communities that we serve that can help people embody, live the kind of lifestyle where we all can thrive? So in comes our toolkit. Looking at the time, doing okay. So the antidote to isolation. We are wired to belong. There is nothing that feels worse as a human being than rejection, because rejection feels actually very threatening to our survival response. We need each other to survive. So of course, this pandemic is going to hit every button in terms of that in-person need for each other, for connection. We're lucky that we have technology that's keeping us connected, that's allowing us to do breakout rooms where we can have lively conversations, but we know it's also not the same. So just acknowledging that this is an incredibly hard time for all of us, with that feeling of I mean, we are living where the word social distancing comes out of our mouth all day long. We're reading about it all day long. So this is a really important part of our toolkit, and finding ways to stay connected, even in this overwhelming sense of isolation, is so incredibly important. You practiced that in the breakout group that you had together. What I'd like to offer just quickly is an overview of a mindful self compassion break, which is a way to stay soothed and feel connected even when we're in isolation. How do we reconnect our heads and our hearts? How do we reconnect that 80% that is swimming in threat to a cognitive understanding, or even a felt understanding that in the moment we're okay, to balance out that sense of hypervigilance and warding off threat when we can, to bring ourselves back into our window of tolerance? We can offer ourselves some mindful self-compassion. So there are 3 universals for mammalian soothing. Yes, we're mammals. Physical warmth, gentle self-vocalization, and a kind, soothing touch. And we can offer all of this to ourselves. You might want to write this down. This is a great thing to offer to others as well as to ourselves. A mindful self-compassion break involves 3 parts. The first part is, with awareness comes choice, recognizing that we're in a moment of difficulty, recognizing that the heart feels pain, recognizing that we're jumpy, recognizing we're out of our window. Just having that moment of mindfulness is step 1. Step 2 is being able to recognize that while we're not all in the same boat, we are all in the same storm. Recognizing our common humanity. recognizing that the suffering I feel in my heart is being felt fairly universally right now. I'm not alone. And that piece to me speaks to the social connection that creates safety that we need so desperately right now. Step 3 of a mindful self-compassion break is having tools to offer yourself kindness. Grounding and resourcing, that's a great tool for offering yourself some kindness. So we practiced that earlier. It might just be a simple phrase. I was making the bed the other day and it just felt overwhelming, the pain in my heart about the things that we've lost and the anguish of people much less privileged than myself, what they are going through right now. It felt too much. And I stopped making the bed for a minute. I noticed it, put my hand to my heart, and I just said, ouch, this swear word hurts. I mean, that's all we can do sometimes. Feel the pain, let it go through, and offer ourselves some kindness. I'm sorry, I'm sorry this is so hard. What we would like to say to someone else, we can say to ourselves. And it's a hard shift to do that because we're not programmed that way. It unpacks some conditioning that says that's selfish or weird, but it soothes. That kind, soothing voice truly soothes. And even that empathy of just, ouch, this swear word hurts, is much more comforting than the helplessness or the hopelessness when we feel we can't fix it or change it in the moment. So we've talked about this a lot already. I have a really simple tool for self-regulation that I offer to every one of my clients, every one of the intern therapists that we train at Sky Center. I learned it from a mindfulness teacher named Fleet Mall, and he spoke to a room of educators in Albuquerque. I imagine maybe one of you was there. It was a few years ago. He said, if we teach this one practice to ourselves, to everyone we work with, it could save the world. Now, I'm not sure about that, Fleet Mall, but I took him to heart and I have been sharing it, and my family's really sick of it now, actually, because I do it about 10 times a day walking through my house. But it's incredibly soothing and it's super fast, on the go. You take a deep breath in. It's called straw breath. You take a deep breath in and you breathe out as if through a straw. So if you'd like, take a try right now. So take as often as needed. So we talked about mindful awareness, and I think what we're going through right now is a good example of why this is not just a skill set that is helpful when you want to relax or go to the spa. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about mindful awareness. Mindfulness helps us show up when we feel helpless, just as much as mindfulness can help us when we're needing to soothe ourselves. Right now, it's very easy, especially with so much uncertainty in front of us, and news that changes every day, and sources that are all over the map, from conspiratorial to hopeless to overly optimistic and delusional. What do we trust? So what I trust is facts over fear, and what's right in front of my nose, what's right in my community, what's right in my heart. This practice that has been an anchor for me for about a decade now has given me a skill set for bringing my mind back into what I know and what I can do right here, right now. It is an antidote to catastrophizing. It is also an antidote to Pollyanna-ish optimism. Right here, right now. And when we also have a practice that allows us to understand, what am I aware of now? We have more choice. What is real now? What are the facts now? We have more choice. Hope. Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. And I'd like to offer us a practice. This is our second big practice, longer practice. In order to cultivate some of the hope that is necessary to navigate through this time, to believe that there is another side of this. I'll read this before we go into the practice. This is something that is meaningful to me. Hope is a belief that what we do might matter, an understanding that the future is not yet written. It's informed, astute, open-mindedness about what can happen and what role we may play in it. Hope looks forward, but it draws its energies from the past, from knowing histories, including our victories, and their complexities and imperfections. It means not being the perfect that is the enemy of the good, not snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, not assuming you know what will happen when the future is unknown. So I invite you, if it feels comfortable, to close your eyes for this exercise. And of course, you can just relax and listen. The meditation that I'm going to offer is from Tara Brach's Radical Compassion. It's interpreted by me. And it's titled, Calling Upon Your Future Self. I'd love for you to have some paper and pen nearby. We'll have a little moment at the end for some journaling. So finding a comfortable posture, tuning back in to your resource as we begin. External or internal, feet, seat, or back. Noticing what's here. Coming into stillness. And I invite you, if it feels comfortable, to take several long, deep breaths to collect your attention. And scan the body and notice if there's anywhere that feels tight, and just seeing if you can soften and release ever so slightly. And the invitation is to scan your current life. Scan our current context. And allow yourself to feel whatever emotional reactivity is present for you and how you feel that. Just noticing the tightness perhaps in the front axis of the body, your gut, your heart, or your throat, or wherever else it may be present for you, a tightness in the shoulders or the lower back. Just noticing. Is our context bringing up more fear, more hurt, more anger, more grief? With curiosity, inviting the discomfort to be here, soothing as necessary, and naming what's alive for you inside of this context, right here, right now. And now, gaze into the future, 10 or 20 years from now, and visualize your future self's home. Where in this home do you see your future self? Are you inside or outside? Are you in a certain room? Are there pictures, furnishings, or plants nearby that hold a special meaning for you? Is there a pet, a person, or a thing that feels important that you see with you there? And how do you look? How does your future self look? Your clothing, your hair, your facial expression. What is the expression in your future self's eyes? Can you see kindness or a caring welcome? The invitation is to take some moments to connect with the place where you feel most stuck and vulnerable, and then share your current difficulty with your future self. Now imagine that your future self is offering healing attention and care to your current self. You might feel that you are receiving some touch of kindness, or maybe an energetic embrace. You might receive a message of guidance or of reassurance. See if you might be able to hear that clearly now, and in an act of kindness, repeat it to yourself. Feel your future self holding you and filling you with loving presence. Sense that whatever is most difficult right now, even the deepest fears and grief, can be included in this open and nurturing presence. Relax into your future self's embrace until you sense that you are fully merging with, at one with, your future self. Take some moments to sense how the love and wisdom of your most evolved being lives in you now and always. Trust that with practice, you can access this awakened, compassionate heart space with more and more ease. I invite you to take your time opening your eyes. You might want to keep your chin tucked and open your eyes, and then slowly return your attention to our shared space. And I invite you just to take a minute to write down any messages that you received, what you felt as you received those messages, what you felt as you saw your future self, and that future self offer you some compassion and wisdom. Okay. So I'd love for a brave soul when we get to the Q&A moment and in a little bit, if you feel comfortable sharing what your future self might have had to offer. I've done this in a few team meetings and meetings with community members, and hearing what our future selves have to say to each other is quite comforting. And in a concrete way, when we're working with youth, this exercise might be a little too out there, but that felt sense of the experience for yourself could be translated into working with the youth and just in the most simple ways talking about what they were looking forward to before this happened. Can they imagine what that will be like in the future? And even just, what do you look like in 10 years? What does it feel like in 10 years? And that can be a really fun exercise with kids. A lot of times they're famous, but that's okay. That's a good feeling inside of the nervous system. So physiological well-being, I mean, for starters, it's an awareness of where we're at. If we are in gear 5 out of our window for weeks and days and years and months on end, it's going to have an impact on our bodies, our immune system responses, our ability to ward off illness. So that right there is reason to find ourselves some moments of regulated states, even inside of contexts of threat, to feel joy, to feel relief, to lower that cortisol response so it's not creating inflammation in our systems in an ongoing way. Of course, it's adaptive. Of course, we have little control over how stressed out we are. What we can do with ourselves, for ourselves, with some of the practices I've offered you today, can help ever so slightly move that needle out of the stress response, create a little more balance. We also want to think, there are a lot of school nurses on here, but I always go to thyroid conditions, other kinds of conditions that can be impacting the mental health of youth, and wanting to rule out those kind of conditions. And of course, water, rest, exercise, and sleep. We need to assess for those kinds of lifestyle habits in terms of how they're impacting behavioral health. And without rest, sleep, those are the same thing, rest and sleep, but good nutrition, exercise, it's going to impact our ability to be resilient. And even inside of this context, we can attend to this facet of our human experience and our human condition. And I would like to invite you all to stand up for a second. We're just gonna have a quick stretch, okay? So I had a nurse actually give me a little bit of research that if you just stretch for 30 seconds a day, someone can correct me, this is super anecdotal and it happened in a spin class. The nurse was a teacher in a spin class on another planet that we used to live in. And she said something, maybe it was 2 minutes, but just a little stretch a day can actually have a huge impact on our immune system and our ability to be adaptive and reduce our stress response. 30 seconds. There are a lot of great Tai Chi videos out there, and of course, yoga and exercise. Here's one of those opportunities. We have more access to exercise, free exercise online, I think, than we've ever had before. So thank you for indulging me with that. And our last spoke of the toolkit, nature. Nature is not going anywhere, at least right now. At least right now. It's holding us, it's reminding us of the cycles that we go through, that even this dreaded virus is part of nature. We don't have any control over it. The thing that is hopeful to me about that, even if it is the outside 18 months, there's a trajectory. I don't like the idea of it being 18 months in quarantine, social distancing, but I do like the idea that it has a natural cycle. And I think that's something that is helpful and hopeful to remind myself when this feels endless. Spring returns. Spring always returns. And also, there are physiological benefits to spending time in nature. I actually have this little quote that I'm grabbing. In Japan, there is a practice of forest bathing that some of you may have heard of. I'm gonna put my glasses on. So the practice of forest bathing provides health benefits. So breathing in phytonicides, which are organized compounds emitted by trees, it may stimulate our immune systems and reduce inflammation. The study found concrete evidence that green space significantly reduces people's levels of salivary cortisol, a physiological marker of stress. So we know it feels good to get out there. And we know on a spiritual level how important it is to be reminded that we not only benefit from nature, we are nature. And our human nature in balance is resilient. Nature in balance is resilient. And with that, here's a concrete, if you want to take some notes, I guess everyone gets this, but I've mentioned the antidotes to suicide risk factors. Here it is in writing. And with that, it's time for Q&A. So thank you for your time and for practicing this toolkit for well-being with me.